Please feel free to ask your questions. There's a gentleman in the pale green shirt there.
Ajahn, I have a problem, and that is that mind keeps on going to the past quite rigorously, in spite of all my efforts and having been meditating for umpteen years now. Yet I have not been able to control it. And the wholesome thoughts, unwholesome thoughts, they keep on disturbing a lot. So how what else can be done? What I am doing already, I do not understand.
Well, there are different approaches that we can take. Ajahn Chah's standard was if you try to let go of a particular pattern of thought and it keeps coming back, then he would suggest, well, go to it, bring your attention to it, and inquire, well, why does this have such a strength or such importance? What makes this so interesting? So that you're applying that quality of investigation to explore what it is that has that kind of interesting or attractive or compelling quality to it. Often if we are averse, like we dislike something, we push it away, we don't want it to be there, we give it power by that attitude of aversion. And so the more you don't want it to be there, then the more you give it strength. And it's that thing that I don't want to be around. So that we give it power, we give it strength by our negativity. Because hate is an equally powerful force as love. Liking and disliking have equal strength. So that the part of the practice then is looking at the attitude that's there. That if you say, I don't want my mind to be going off to recreate the past, I don't want to get lost in these memories, they're absolutely forbidden. And see what the effect of that is. That to see if there is aversion there, there's resentment, there's that vibhava tanha, the desire to get rid of, because that can be the very thing that's keeping it alive. So that that's one way of exploring it. Another is if you can't say let it go, then to bring it to the center of attention. Say, okay, so what is it that's so interesting here? Now I'm going to look at this thought, this memory, and not allow anything else to be there, so that you actually inflate it rather than make a kind of a pushing away. You say, okay, please come in, talk to me, tell me why you're so important, why my whole life has to revolve around recreating this image of this good thing, this bad thing, this difficult thing. Tell me why you're so important. I'd love to hear. So you can use your imagination in that way. Often that kind of say opposite approach is very helpful. So again, if you've read many of Ajahn Sumedho's teachings, you'll notice he talks about this kind of the working with aversion in this way quite often. So he would use terms like thinking the unthinkable. Like, say, if you have an angry thought towards somebody here, you say, like, I hate Arpan, he thinks he's so special. Oh, yeah, he's an awful person. Oh, I shouldn't think that. He's really good, he's a kind person, he works so hard. I shouldn't have those negative thoughts. I'm just inventing this. This is a complete random creation. Yeah. Just using Arpan as a sort of convenient object. Yeah. So then instead of saying, oh, I shouldn't think that, that's really unskillful, that's really unkind, and I should be a good Buddhist, I shouldn't have these negative thoughts. If that's something that's got some strength behind it, what Ajahn Sumedho would encourage is like, okay, put it front center and give it some strength. Like, I'm suffering because of you, Arpan. If you were different, I would be happy. And you can, as you actually phrase that emotion in words, you can't usually get to the end of the sentence before it falls apart, because you know it's totally ridiculous. But when it's sort of pushed away to the sides, it has power. When you get it front center and say, if I got rid of this person, if he didn't exist, everything would be great. And you go, oh yeah, right. You'd never find anything else to get upset about. Or if it's a desire, if only I had this, if only I lived on a different street, I would never want anything else ever again. Yeah, it's not true, but it's not your thoughts saying, this isn't true. It's like from direct intuitive wisdom that no, it doesn't work that way. So sometimes that thinking the unthinkable and say giving it strength and clarity, that takes away its power. It's like if you're watching a conjurer, a magician. If you turn all the lights up and slow the film down, you can see exactly how the conjurer does the trick. So then the trick doesn't work because you see how it's done. So those are some ways of working with that, and that for myself, I find that just highlighting the emotion, or particularly say with memory, that if there's something like a very sweet memory that the mind wants to recreate and go back there, say, well, okay, I can remember that, but and that was a delightful occasion, but where are all those people now? Where is that place now? Who am I now? So that rather than pushing it away, you open it up. You say, well, yes, that was sweet, but so is any jalebi. So it's sweet, but that was a sweet moment, but so what? Or is that, and that kind of reflection I was talking about with Ajahn Chah, encouraging that to pick up the uncertain nature of that. Oh, that was so sweet. That was the perfect day. Is that so? Or even more simple, so? And that in that way of reflecting on it, you give it a different context, different flavor. So I find now, it doesn't happen that often, but if I remember something from my childhood or when I was a student, and the mind goes, oh, that was a great day, or that was such a nice person, you only have to think, yeah, but she's 65 now, and probably, at least a grandmother, if not a great grandmother. So, okay, that was a sweet picnic that we had, but it's all gone long ago. And so that the use of that wise reflection to pick up that and kind of to pick up the mind state and explore it is often the most helpful way for it to lose its power. Yes, the woman with the black and white shirt.
Okay, so my question is, how to encourage mind to be quiet? Because at least I have observed with my mind, it loves to indulge in, past memories or gossip. That's more attractive. If the mind is silent, then it is fine for maybe few moments, but then it's craving for some intellectual thought or discussion or stimulation. So how to encourage mind to be quiet?
Yeah, good question. When I first went into the monastery, I have a bit of an unusual past because I was never a lay Buddhist. I was never a lay meditator. I kind of was already in the monastery when I started to meditate. So I don't have any experience of trying to practice as a lay Buddhist. I was always in the monastery. So when I began life in the monastery, I never meditated, so my mind was incredibly active, very busy. So people talked about the possibility of one's stream of thoughts stopping, but it was just something that I had no experience of. I'd never known my mind to go quiet. And I'd been in the monastery, I think, about 18 months before I had my first quiet moment internally. And that was when I was exhausted after having been up for 2 nights in a row, I think. Just sheer exhaustion. Oh my goodness, it stopped. So oftentimes it's the style of life that we have. I don't know what your occupation is, but if you're engaged with people, talking with people, if you're engaged, you're doing a lot of intellectual work during the course of the day, then you're conditioning a lot of the vaci sankhara, the kind of verbal formations that is being given strength in your life, and so that to think that you're going to sit down and close your eyes and that flow of words and ideation is just going to switch off is, in a way, it's asking a bit too much. Many years ago, when Ajahn Amaro first came to London, one of the regulars at the Vihara asked the same question. And she said, get home, I sit down to meditate, and my mind is just going 20 to the dozen, as they say. And he gave her various bits of advice, and he said, well, what's your occupation? And she said, well, I'm a telephone operator. I mean, that's a bit ancient history now. You don't really get phone operators, but people on a call center, that kind of thing, that you'll be just receiving people's phone calls all day long and then connecting this call with that receiver. So he said, well, no wonder, you're spending your whole working day with all these kind of these words and ideas, and that's your job. So that has its effect. So along with concentration to help the mind to be one-pointed and not to be following trains of thought, also just to be making friends with the presence of thinking. So as I've been saying a few times over this retreat, the peace really lies in the attitude, not in the object. So that if we think, I can only be peaceful if my mind goes quiet, or if all thought stops, then there's not going to be a lot of peace. So part of it, I'm not saying concentration and training the mind to be quiet is very, very useful, but I would say the real root of peacefulness is in the attitude that we have. So say, for example, we have the sound of the fans and the air conditioning going now, so this is there in the background, and we can hear that and we don't make anything of it, like I was saying yesterday. So in the same way, if we train ourselves to listen to our thought, just like it's the sound of the fan going, or it's the sound of the kids in the street or the traffic, that there's some noise going on, but so what? It's not meaningful, it's not interesting, it's nothing new, it's not significant. And as I was saying in the questions yesterday, I reckon about 95% of what goes through our thought stream is just nonsense. It doesn't have any meaning or value. It's just repeated conversations or stories or memories and ideas that we've picked up from the TV or from other people in the movies and whatnot. So that change of attitude towards thinking, just to be able to not give it so much value. So that if one example I like to give is if your thoughts were the sound of your neighbor's radio, you didn't choose the station, you're not interested, you can understand the meaning of it as it comes through the wall or across the fence, but it's there, but it's not anything that's meaningful or significant or valuable, but it's just sort of burbling on in the background. We can turn our attention away from it. We don't have to give it any meaning. And so just as you can hear the sound of the neighbor's radio and not make anything of it, we can relate to our own thoughts in that way. And as I was saying to the other gentleman, that often it's like the aversion that we have. I wish this would shut up. My mind won't go quiet. I hate this chattering thought. Why, you make the patterns of thinking into the enemy, and that it's a problem. It's the enemy. I've got to get rid of it, and all that negativity is just adding strength to it. Whereas if we learn how to just kind of not be interested, to advert our attention. Like, an advertisement means to advert, to turn your attention towards something. So you're turning your attention towards the silence of the mind rather than towards the content of thoughts. So and it depends whether it's just sort of chattering or whether the thoughts are very obsessive about particular issues or they're very aversive or filled with greed, then you can work with them in different ways. But if it's just the basic incessant chatter, which is what I would find, and replaying music, I realized I'd spent my entire childhood from the age of about 9 listening to pop music on the radio, and I could replay in my head, just thousands and thousands of pop songs, and somehow I could remember the tunes and the words to most of them. And everything, living in a monastery, life is very quiet, so almost everything would be a cue for a song that would remind me of a line or an image from a pop song, and off it would go. So that that quality of patience and say non-contention. Like not making something into a problem. So that's why, in terms of meditation guidance, I often say that really the foundation for samatha and vipassana, concentration and insight, is really loving kindness. Not fighting against your body, not fighting against the mind. That it's not making them into a problem or an enemy, but rather working in a collaborative way. So that then, just like a restless child is sort of jumping up and running across the room and saying, come back, sit down. And it needs encouragement and steady attention to help them to stay focused. But the inclination of the child is to be jumping up and running around. So our minds can be just the same. If you get angry with a child, you yell at them or threaten them, and then you have tears and tension and it's a painful process. But if you have a collaborative attitude towards the child, even a really bouncy, energetic child, you can enjoy working with them. It can be fun and delightful to be part of that. And the child is not your enemy. The child is not a problem. It's just that's the way a 2-year-old is, or a 3-year-old. They have that kind of restless, bouncy kind of energy, so that if your basic attitude is working with the mind, then that has its effects, because the means and the end are unified. If you use an aggressive, forceful, willful means, then you'll get an aggressive, forceful and conflicted result. If you have a collaborative, kindly and caring means, then that will produce a harmonious and peaceful result. What kind of work do you do?
Not certainly the telephone operator. So my job is not related to like interacting with a lot of people. Basically, I'm into accounting. But I think that's how I am. I think a lot, so maybe it has to do with something to do with that.
Yeah, well, accounting, you've got to juggle a lot of numbers.
Yes.
You got to keep all the columns lined up and everything straight. So it is that amount of, we are the heirs of our karma. And so if you spend a lot of time juggling concepts and numbers and words and that, to say, well, that's the cause, this is the effect. And in Buddhist practice, equanimity, upekkha, arises from reflecting on the laws of cause and effect. So that if you say, well, of course, I've been spending my whole day filled with numbers, getting the books up to date, so I sit down in the evening, and of course, there's still a certain momentum. So then even if there is that activity, the attitude towards that activity can be quite peaceful and be non-contentious.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ajahn, my question is, how does one deal with a situation when a repeated pattern keep occurring in your life? What is the learning one should take, and how does one remain detached? Or how does one have a wise reflection?
Depends what the pattern is. because that could mean all kinds of things. Is it something that you do, or something that someone else is doing to you, or something that you get from the government, or the weather? I mean, there's all kinds of different patterns, and we have our own individual ability to do something about it is going to vary.
So how does one deal with the situation when the same situation keeps coming back to you with different people? How does one deal with it? You know that this has happened before also, but you know it is a suffering, but you're unable to come out of the situation, and you understand that this is dukkha, but you really don't know how to come out of it because you're not very satisfied or happy with that kind of a situation.
So in terms of some kind of behavior that you kept repeating or that people relate to in a particular way?
Yeah, sometimes a very blind reaction. You know you are not supposed to react and you do react.
Well, first of all, just to clarify what the pattern is. And say, well, how does this thing work? What is it that goes on? And so replaying a few of those incidents. Okay, it happened with this person and this person, this person. So what's going on there? Why does that occur? And you can't just sort of snap your fingers and make it go away. But if you get to see what the causes are, and say why things go in that direction. So, for example, you might realize, it's always when I'm tired and hungry, and I'm really looking forward to having some time by myself. And then somebody says something, and then kaboom. Okay, if I'm not tired and I'm not hungry and I'm feeling comfortable, it doesn't happen. Okay, I'm not reading your mind or anything. This is sort of using random kind of imagination, so that I say, look at that. Or it could be something that is a bit more sort of psychological. It could be like, isn't that interesting? Whenever I get praised, or somebody says, well done, you're really great, I think you're fantastic, then I do something to mess it all up. Why do I do that? People say, this is great, I really appreciate you, well done, fantastic job, and something in me says, no. And without any kind of intention, I find some way of proving them wrong. Weird. So I'm just making these things up. So that whether it's something that's more sort of physically based, like being tired and hungry, or there's some kind of psychological reflex, just to get familiar with the pattern. Okay, when this and this condition are there, that's you get this result. So then, by exploring that and seeing what the cause is and what the effect is, then that's sort of part one, really. And then part two is, how personally do I take this? Like, I've got a problem with being short-tempered when I'm tired, or I've got a problem with self-sabotage. I can't, somehow I don't feel I deserve to be loved or successful. So how personally is that condition taken? So it's my problem. This is the real difficulty. I shouldn't be this way. I should be different. The mind is taking it really personally. So again, one of the themes that I find most helpful with Dhamma practice, and really the use of insight meditation, vipassana, is really helpful for. It's say the title of Ajahn Amato's most recent book is "Don't Take Your Life Personally." So I think I've often said, I think if you just had the title and all the pages in the book were blank, that would be enough. So it's just so perfectly stated, because that's so much the issue. So that if your friend came to you and said, I have this habit, I'm always doing this, this is terrible, what do you think's going on? You'd be able to relate to it and assess it in a whole different way. Or if you were a therapist and somebody came to you and said, this is my issue, this is going on, you would relate to it as a pattern that needs to be understood in a way that nature works, rather than my problem, that shouldn't be this way, I've got to get rid of it, I've got to be different. So that degree to which the mind takes these patterns personally and says, this is my problem, or the way I am, and I don't want to be this way, I want to be that way instead, then we use the meditation to explore that, what we call I-making and mind-making, ahankara, mamankara, how much this is me and mine. And so then in the meditation, you can say, let the mind be as peaceful and focused as possible, and then bring up a memory of one of those encounters or those events, and then use the meditation to explore the physical sensation that goes with that, feeling stressed, or what it's like when you blow up, or why you want to, say, push away someone's approval or affection, or whatever. To explore that as a felt sensation in the body, a sense of say, anger or resentment or feeling stressed, and then in that way, it's much easier to know that as a condition of nature. Just like, it's Delhi in the hot season, the air conditioning goes off, and the temperature starts rising. It only got to 33.5, so it's kind of not bad at all, really. That's the condition. It's Delhi in the hot season, so you feel hot. It's like a natural form, no big thing. It's just the way nature works. So that, this is the cause. This being is hungry and tired and stressed, and then someone comes along, drops that thought into those few words into the mix, and boom, that's the result. So that, it's Delhi in the hot season, the air temperature rises, it's like this. So then, the more that the mind can relate to those patterns in a non-personal way, you're not suppressing it or kind of getting rid of it, but just saying, this isn't just me. This isn't something that is intrinsically a problem. It's just a pattern that has a particular cause, has particular qualities. It doesn't need to be made into an enemy or a problem. It needs to be understood. And so that when the mind relates to it more as a pattern of nature, a natural form, then there's a spaciousness around it. There's a coolness to it. Another way of working with it is, as I said, if your friend came to you and said, I've got this particular problem or this habit, and I feel really out of my depth, what do you think I should do? And then noticing what arises within you as a sort of a way to respond to it. If it was your friend who came to you with that problem or that issue, what you would say to them. And often, if it was your friend who had those issues and difficulties, your own wisdom is far more easy to access than when it's me and my problem, my stuff. This kind of the mind gets much more into a tangle of self-criticism or feeling of say not capable, or of working with it, or something that's going to be there forever as a permanent problem, and so on. But if it's our friend coming to us with the same issues, then we can respond to it usually with a lot more clarity and understanding and compassion than when it's my problem. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, one at the front here. Can you wait for the microphone?
Okay, so one is just a clarification. When the lady asked the question, she said she experiences calm moments and then she has a craving for something intellectual. So that is something very different from what normally one would deal with, which is trying to make the mind calm. She says, did I understand you right? Yeah. She says she gets the calm moment and then she has a craving for some intellectual thought or something. So do you think if that be the state, it's something to give up the craving, not indulge, or?
Well, sometimes cravings, like if you're hungry, you need food. It's not every desire is unskillful. But I said, when I give the same response, it's like, well, where's this coming from? That there's a wave of desire for intellectual activity or intellectual engagement. If we're able to be aware of that, then we can recognize, well, does the mind really need to follow this? And if that's fed, if that desire is followed, is that going to bring any kind of permanent satisfaction? So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question effectively.
I just was feeling that part was unanswered. So if she's got the answer, then it's fine for me. My question is coming.
Well, but maybe to finish that, then, so that desire is something to be understood. And so that sometimes there can be a feeling of like, oh, I'm interested in this, or that looks attractive, or that sense of something is appealing. So there's a sensation there of being attracted, or of a sensation of being of dislike, of being put off. And so that Vedana, that feeling, that's very simple. Like liking, disliking, neutral feeling, no big thing. If then that gives rise to craving, tanha, then if feeling conditions craving, as the Buddha describes in the dependent origination, then the mind starts to lose its focus. So that if you can be aware of that sense of, well, I'm interested in this, or that I'm attracted to this, I like the idea, my mind wants to get stuck into this train of thought or start chattering about this. There's a liking, but we don't have to follow that liking. There's almost like a bridge between Vedana and Tanha. We can stand on the bridge and not cross it. Or maybe a better example is like you're standing at the train station. The train is there, you're on the platform. You can choose to get on the train or not get on the train. So Vedana is like you're on the platform. Tanha is you've climbed on the train. Then Upadana is the train starts moving. Bhava is the train is out of the station and underway. You can't open the train doors often nowadays. Maybe many Indian trains you still can, but British trains you can't open the doors anymore once the train's moving. So the analogy of getting off the train when it's already underway doesn't work so well. But it's it used to be a good way of describing how Vedana, Tanha, Upadana, Bhava work in the kind of succession of factors of dependent origination. So that if you can be aware of that feeling of liking or being interested, or my mind wants to launch into this flow of thought, or like, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, it's interesting, but really, do I need to? Do I need to climb on that train? And the more that we can recognize that feeling of liking, of interest, and the more mindfulness there is, then that Vedana is there, that feeling, it's like liking or disliking, but then we realize, well, there's disliking, but I don't have to hate it or fear it or start a fight against it. It's just disliking. It doesn't have to be a problem. Or liking, yeah, I like it, this is pleasant, this is delicious, but I don't have to chase after it. So that the more that we develop mindfulness and wisdom, then the more there is that quality of choice around Vedana, that rather than going towards craving and clinging and becoming, and Sokha parideva dukkha domanasa upayasa, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair, dukkha, then instead the feeling is just what it is. It's just a sensation of liking, that the mind doesn't have to buy into it. So that in one of the Buddha's teachings, he describes how if the mind is well developed, then even though there might be feelings of liking, disliking, neutral feelings, then they are headed by concentration, dominated by mindfulness, surmounted by wisdom. Samadhi, sati, and panya are the things that help the mind to keep feeling and sensation in the context. So there can be something like really disliking, and it's just disliking. You don't have to make a fight. There can be liking, but you don't have to want or to get. Thinking of the fans and the cooling system today, and also the temperature. So I lived in Abhayagiri Monastery in California for a long time, and the monastery was in sort of development for many years, and we had this old garage that was converted to be the meditation hall. And we didn't have air conditioning, but we had fans. And we had two abbots, myself and Ajahn Pasno, we were co-abbots. And I always wanted the coolness of the room was the most desirable thing. And I didn't really mind about the sound of the fans. That was completely insignificant to me. And the temperature would be hotter than this. So it's 40, 45 degrees every summer. It would be, it's not so damp. The air is a bit clearer. But, the temperature is very, very hot in Mendocino County in the summertime. But Ajahn Pasanno really didn't like the sound of the fans. That would be bothersome to him. So if he was present and it was up at 40 degrees, then we sit down to meditate, off go the fans. But then if he wasn't there and we sat down to meditate and I was the senior person, and the fans would stay on. So the rest of the Sangha knew, okay, which Ajahn is present. And so it was kind of neat, really, because to me the sound of the fans was a beautiful sound. It's like, coolness, good. To him, the sound of the fan is, awful, don't like, switch it off. And so both of us learned how to work with the condition. He was quite happy to be sitting there dripping with sweat and not have the sound of the fan, and I preferred to have the sound of the fan and not be dripping. But it's not as though one is right and the other is wrong. You're recognizing what is the mind doing with liking and disliking. And you can know, here's the feeling of disliking the heat. It's just disliking. You don't have to write a story about it. You don't have to climb on the train. And similarly, with liking, you can like, be really enjoying something and saying that's really interesting, and okay, don't have to add anything to it. So your question, you got your own. No, you're not on. There you go. Yes.
Just a delay of. It's just the same question which I interrupted your talk yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. You're very patient.
No.
Apparently.
No, I kind of thought it was fine to interject, but later on I realized that it interrupted the entire creation that you had in the hall. So that's why.
No problem. No blame.
All right. Thank you. So yesterday when you explained about handling anxiety, the way you had a 2-year project, and I could relate to it because yes, when I am angry, I can relate to a certain kind of feeling. So for anxiety there could be, and I extrapolate and I could relate to what you said. But then during the talk last night, when you talked about being prepared for the uncertain, and this is something I picked up last month when I was here for a few days, and I went through the book by Ajahn Chah, mm-hmm. Everything arises, everything falls away. Mm-hmm. And his thing about having the person prepared for anything the next moment, it was kind of startling, and then you reinforced yesterday. And I felt that if you're prepared like that, then do you really need to have that technique of observing the sensations and then handling anxiety? Because you would never have anxiety if you were to really be stable in the thought that the next moment or the next day or the next hour is going to be uncertain. So I just wanted your thoughts. I mean, is it that if one can act at the level of thought very clearly, then one need go through the gross breath and sensation process?
Yeah, if there's sufficient mindfulness and wisdom, if that quality of let's say awareness has been developed, then the mind is not creating that reaction in the first place. And so, that the cause for that, the fuel for that, is not there, so that the mind doesn't have to dismantle that or work with that, because it's sort of it hasn't got any support. There's nothing. There's no petrol in the tank. But that takes a lot of time and effort, because often our habits are very strong. So whether it's with anxiety or aversion or whatever it might be, the process of training, spiritual training, is to be developing those skills to the point where the mind is no longer, feeding those habits of greed, hatred, delusion, that they are not something that is being sort of supported on a moment by moment, day by day basis. But that takes a lot of work. It's more than you can do in a weekend. But it's that's how it is now. So that say with anxiety, most of the time, I don't have to do any dissolving of anxiety because it just doesn't arise in the same way that it used to. So if I remember how it was and I look at how my mind relates to things now, it's like the universe is apart. I'm not making any claims about being totally enlightened or anything, but just it is enormously different. But it takes a lot of patience and steadiness and readiness to work with that. Also, when you were speaking yesterday evening, it made me think how I think one of the points you made or questions you had was about the developing that perception of uncertainty. Say, well, how can it both be a problem, like a hindrance of worry and anxiety, a doubt, and yet it also seems to be the cure, which is something that people often ask. And I'm not sure if you were asking that, but now I'm on the subject. But it's when the mind is caught into questioning and doubt, and it's just a kind of blur of thinking. Like, what should I do? What's the right thing for me to do? Or how's this working? Is this going to succeed? Oh no, I think it's going to fail. Is it going to fail? Maybe it's all sort of half sentences. It's not clearly formed. It's just like in a sense, there's a worrying reflex looking for an object, so that when the Buddha describes doubt, and the doubt is a hindrance to samadhi, then it's this kind of questioning, and often based around self-view, like what should I do? What's the right thing for me to do? What was I in the past? How will it be in the future? How are things going to turn out for me? And that kind of question or doubting, it just creates more confusion and tension. The kind of questioning of wise reflection, say, it has a whole different tone to it. So when there's that exploring of where does this come from? Is there a cause that's visible to of this, or what's this likely to turn into? Who is it that's aware? There seems to be a me who's the meditator. What does that me look like? So that way of exploring or using wise reflection, there's a whole different tone to it. It's applied deliberately. It's like a deliberate kind of thinking. And there's a measured quality. Like there's a space before, and then a question is posed. Is that so? This is great. Is that so? Pause. And then the sense of the intuition of how things are can arise from that. So when that kind of questioning or exploring is a genuine wise reflection, yoniso manasikara, dhamma vijaya, then there's an integrity to it. The mind thinks in full sentences. As a measured quality, a space kind of before, and then there's the thought or the question, there's a space after. So it has a whole different quality. And so then it's rather like a scalpel. If you're a surgeon, you need a sharp knife to make an incision. And if you handle the knife in the right way, then you can carry out the surgery and bring about the change that's needed through the operation in a good way. If you just pick up the scalpel without really looking, you don't know what you're doing with it, you're going to cut yourself or make a mess of the patient. So that it's, in a sense, it's the same tool, but the way that it's handled has a very, very different effect. So any questions from this side? If you can wait for the microphone. Sorry, he's got one.
Ajahn, I want to know how to deepen the understanding of Dharma. It's working, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I want to know how to deepen the understanding of Dharma, because we understand it intellectually, we read books, but when it comes to the practical application of it, many a times we do not tend to do what is there in the Dhamma. We know that this is not right, but because of the habits of the mind or because of the conditioning of the mind, it tends to do what it was doing earlier. So, how to deepen the understanding?
Well, the simple answer is more practice. So, one of the characteristics of the Thai forest tradition is it's almost a kind of anti-intellectual. I'm not a very good example because I'm a big book reader. I'm like a bookish kind of a bloke. But so Ajahn Chah, his encouragement would be when you came to stay at Wat Pah Pong, his monasteries, he'd say, put all the books away for 5 years and just read this Tripitaka. Read your own mind. And I feel in terms of deepening the understanding of Dhamma, that's in a sense what's often the missing piece, is that we have a lot of Dhamma information, but we're not in a sense relating to the Dhamma, which is the nature of our own body, our own mind, our own life. Because Dhamma literally means the way things are. That's the integrative principle of the universe, mental, physical. And so your mind is an aspect of Dhamma. Your body is an aspect of Dhamma. The word Dhammajati means born of the Dhamma. Means the natural world is Dhammajati, born of the Dhamma. So this body, this life, this mind is the field of investigation. This is the laboratory, if you like. And so to understand Dhamma as say manifested through your own mind, your own life, your own patterns of feeling, how perceptions work, how thoughts work, how experiences of success and failure, gain and loss, praise and criticism, comfort and discomfort, how they work. And if we look at that in our life, this mind in your family, in your working life, and functioning in the world, then that is a direct way of sort of deepening the qualities of Dhamma, because then you're not just dealing with ideas, you're dealing with the qualities that the ideas are describing. So that you don't have to have a theory about anger, when that other person in the office says something stupid. Oh, this is an opportunity to learn about anger. So that that emphasis I found is really helpful, because it's easy for us to dwell in the world of ideas and to have everything sort of neatly arranged in the world of ideas, but yet be say not paying attention to how our own life is working, what is kind of important and significant for us in our own life. And so it's kind of interesting. I was having a conversation with Stephen Batchelor a few years ago, and interestingly enough, he's never been to university, even though he's a well-known Buddhist intellectual. He's never been to university. He went straight from school into a monastery, Tibetan monastery. And we were talking about how people keep trying to draw him into the academic world, or writing academic papers, or sign up to be a part of a university department. And even though he does write a lot of books, his real interest is much more around practice and formal practice. And his comment about in the academic world, he said, it's so strange, because you can have people who are these sort of experts on these sort of Buddhist philosophical texts, and these kind of subtle and very, very refined and say transcendent teachings, and the two of them hate each other. They're kind of insulting each other, through their academic papers, or calling each other a complete fool and complete idiot. But the topic of discussion is like the nature of the Buddha mind, or the quality of the qualities of immanence and transcendence embodied in the Sarvastivada notion of the Tathagata. And he said, you have these very subtle or refined concepts, and these guys are kind of going at each other, completely oblivious that the main thing that they're focused on is professional jealousy, And that he said, I'm not interested in getting into that world, because the people get so blind to the actuality of what's going on in their life. The topic is the immanence and transcendence in the Tathagata, but the actuality of your life is that idiot down the corridor, doesn't know what he's talking about. How can he get published? And that if we really want to deepen our practice of our understanding of Dhamma, it's like bringing it home and to really look at our own life and the things that are meaningful and valuable or difficult for us is far more important than reading a lot of books. And again, I kind of blush a bit because I've written a lot of those books. Well, a number of them anyway. Yes, the gentleman at the back there. Yes, sounds live. Go ahead.
Ajahn, why it is so that during the morning time I find on scale of 10 I have concentration of 7. Then thereafter it drops to 5 and 3 in the evening.
Yeah, what is it that's 10 is
Focus. And this is scale.
uh-huh.
This is scale.
Your ability to focus? Yeah. Well, everybody's different. So that some people, they have the opposite experience. And some people are like 2 all day long. So it's really, I'm more of an evening person. So so that my natural disposition is to wake up later and stay up later at night. Ajahn Sumedho is very much a morning person. So he would start his day at 2:30, and with like an hour of exercise and yoga and such. And then by the time we would meet for the morning meditation at 5 o'clock, he's halfway through his day. And now I get up at 3:30 usually, and now after literally 40 years, I'm kind of more used to it. But the first 30 years, it was really difficult. But then in the evening, you'll find that Ajahn Sumedho, he starts to fade. That he's much more of a morning person, and his mind is naturally much kind of more alert and bright. But then you get to 9 o'clock in the evening, and it's like, it's all over. It's time to kind of let things settle and switch off. So it's getting to know yourself, getting to know your own character is part of developing the Dhamma practice, and knowing where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. So that, say, for example, I knew I tend to be an evening person, so therefore, being perky at 5 in the morning, I got to work at that. And it literally took me sort of about 30 years to really get to the point where my alarm goes at 3:30. Okay, ready to go. To be honest, there's some negotiation some days. Okay, 5 more minutes, just 5. But yes, but for Ajahn Sumedho, you just be like, okay, 2:30, let's get going. Yeah, ready for the day. And when I was a young monk, I was like, what? So completely inconceivable. You could do it by willpower, but the system was not really geared to it. But it took about 30 years, but now sort of the system has been sort of retrained somewhat. But getting to know how your own character works, your own system works. In one of the qualities of, a well-rounded person, when the Buddha describes that the 7 qualities of a sappurisa, a good person or a well-rounded person, atanyuta, knowing yourself, is one of those. Like, okay, am I an extrovert? Am I an introvert? Am I an artistic type? Am I a scientific type? Am I a helpful type? Am I a self-contained type? What's my character? So that not praising one over another, but just getting to know what works for you. and how your system operates. Again, it's if you notice that your focus is sharper in the morning and less sharp in the evening, okay, that's the challenge. Is that as the day proceeds, pay more attention to that the drifting into dullness, because that's the way that this one works. And so that if you're more prepared for it, then you can work with it. And so we don't always play to our strong suit. You don't always just sort of go along with what's easiest for us, because otherwise we don't really develop any strengths. But also you're not trying to make things unnecessarily difficult. So it's a balancing of, okay, on a retreat I know the mornings are easy, afternoons and evenings, but then given that's the framework for this period of time, okay, in the afternoon and evening I have to pay more attention to the posture, be more inclined to be rousing energy. Well, it's not so needed in the morning and the evening. You have to put more focus on that, because otherwise it'll just drift into a dull state. Okay, so one more. Yes, this gentleman. If you can wait for the microphone. Last one.
Ajahn, I have a question about sound of silence.
About what?
Sound of silence. This is something, I read your book, and you mentioned that for concentration, you can choose an object, right? Breath is one of the objects, which is always there, and there are other objects as well. So I can understand sound of silence as samatha practice, concentration practice. But in your book, there's mentioned that it can be used for vipassana as well, and that's kind of confusing for me. So I would like to hear, some clarification on that.
Yes. Well, the way I describe it is so that then when he's talking about the sound of silence, this is what they call the inner sound, or the nada. It's like an inner vibration in the background of our hearing. Most people can pick that up as a background sound. If you've got a lot of machinery going, it's a little harder to hear. But if you pay attention, it's always there. It's like a continuous, almost like white noise from a speaker or from a radio. There in the background of our hearing. So in terms of using that for vipassana, then if you've developed the ability to listen to it and pay attention to it, then letting it be there in the background, almost like the sort of the paint on the walls of this room. It's a sort of a very ordinary white-grey paint, but it's there, and so that if the nada sound is developed as a background, then it's not personally created; it's there, but it can be say a backdrop to the flow of thoughts or perceptions, sensations, ideas, moods that arise in the mind, so that it's in a sense you're noticing the screen against which all of the other projections and perceptions are being sort of displayed, so that if that is, say, cultivated, that listening, then it for some people, and I found for myself, that it can make it that much easier not to get lost in a thought or a memory or an idea, a mood, because the presence of the nada sound in the background, you're not focusing on it exclusively, but it's just sort of there in a sense, like a screen sort of forming the walls of the chamber of the heart, if you like. It's sort of there around the edges of your experience, and so that then when there's a thought arises or a physical sensation or a sound, then that nada is there in the background, and it helps the mind to remember, oh, this is just a thought, this is a memory, this is the imagination, this is a sensation. And it can provide a little bit of an extra sense of objectivity, that the mind doesn't get drawn into that sensation or that thought. And so that with vipassana, you're trying to be aware of the flow of ideas or mental images or memories or moods and physical sensations or sounds, just as the mind is looking at the process of experience rather than getting lost in the content. So I find that if you have the nada sound there in the background, it makes it easier not to get lost in the content, but to sustain that quality of attention just on the process of experiencing. So that it's if you like, as a concentration object, then the nada is there in the foreground, and you're using it as the point which excludes everything else, and then in the background is helping to be the framework which is including the point which includes everything. I hope that clarifies it a bit. But that's how I use it, and so that it's that quality of steadiness of presence. It's just in a way, it's like going to a movie and then remembering that the whole thing is displayed on a screen. It's like the screen is a bit more obvious. That the characteristics of the screen that the movie is being projected on, it helps you to remember this is a movie. This is a movie. So that it's in a way it's helping to keep everything in a perspective, in a context, and so the mind is less drawn into the content. So those reflections on anicca, dukkha, anatta, similarly, they're to help the mind sustain that quality of perspective and not get drawn into the content, but just to be knowing that process of experiencing and to be, say, established in that quality of knowing, that awakened awareness that is receiving the flow of perceptions, but is not drawn into them or giving them solidity or value. Okay, so thank you for your good questions. And thank you for the power company bringing the AC back again.